It's a pleasure to have you join us today. Today we are hosting a webinar on the topic of what about boys? And we're glad to have you stream in. For those who are joining us live and for those of us who are joining us through this Zoom link, very warm welcome. My name is Christine Muna. I am from the People's Action for Learning Network, otherwise known as PAL Network, and I will be your moderator for this webinar. Please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat and let us know where you're joining from. And it would be great to have you come on board for this important conversation today. A few housekeeping rules as we allow people to just join in over the next couple of minutes. Please keep your microphone on mute so that you can allow for the conversation to run without a lot of interference. Also, feel free to share your comments, your questions, and your thoughts in the chat with us. All views are very welcome, and please share from a place of mutual respect. We welcome your active participation in this dialogue. Also to let you know that we'll be recording this webinar, so I hope this is okay from all of you so that we can be able to share with other people who will not be able to make it at this time. So we have slotted about an hour for this webinar, and in the interest of time, as people keep on logging in. A little bit about this webinar. What is it about? Why are we having this conversation today? Despite global and regional and country level initiatives, girls are yet to achieve equity, access, retention, and learning achievements at all levels of education. Kenya has made strides in putting in place policies to address various challenges and affect girls' progress in education, therefore improving education access, gender parity, and school retention rates. But what about the boys? This webinar is hosted by the Gender Education Dialogues Movement in response to the evolving discourse on the empowerment of the boy that is gaining traction within our society. This dialogue is dubbed What About the Boys and seeks to provide greater conceptual depth of various gender dynamics and their differentiated effects on girls' and boys' progression in education. Allow me to invite Felicitas Mikali, Program Manager at the Girl Child Network, to give us welcoming remarks and tell us briefly about what this gender education dialogue movement is about. Welcome, Mikali.
Thank you, Christine, and hello, everyone. I welcome you this afternoon, and dear participants, a warm welcome on behalf of the Gender and Education Movement partners to each of you joining us this afternoon for this important discussion on What About Boys narrative, organized by the Gender and Education Movement partners. We are thrilled to have such a diverse and engaged audience from both state and non-state actors committed to deepening our understanding of how gender dynamics impact on girls' and boys' experiences in education. As conversations around gender equity in education often focus on the challenges faced by girls, many times the question comes, what about boys? Don't they also encounter unique struggles that need to be addressed? This webinar is designed to foster a more inclusive and holistic dialogue. Today's session brings together experts, educators, and advocates who will share research, experiences, and actionable strategies to ensure that the conversation on the gender equality is well-rounded and solutions-driven. We hope this event will inspire thoughtful reflection and innovative ideas for creating educational spaces where both boys and girls can thrive. We encourage each one of you to engage, ask questions, and take part in what we hope will be a transformative discussion. Thank you for being here with us, and let's work together to shape a future where every child, regardless of gender, can reach their full potential. Enjoy your session. Thank you. And now, if you allow me, I will briefly talk about the Gender and Education Dialogues movement so that we understand what it is about and where we are coming in from. I'm going to share my screen. I hope we can all see it. Christine, confirm you can see.
It's loading. There we go. We can see
Okay,
it.
thank you. Thank you. So the Gender and Education movement started in 2023, and it started in 2023. It was after a group of women, intergenerational women, who are on advancing children's educational rights, held several meetings. These were informal meetings to discuss about the status of girls' education in Kenya. Out of that was that there was a worrying slump in the progress of girls' education. And the progress that had already been made in terms of the hits went back a bit because of some of the issues like the COVID-19. So this brought together this group of women who decided it was important to look into a conceptual depth of various gender dynamics, specifically the intersectionality of gender norms, patriarchy, and their differentiated effects on girls' and boys' progression in education. Out of that, the movement now was born. And the main purpose of the movement is to create a platform for collective impact on gender and education. And there are two main objectives. The first one is about contributing towards collective impact by strengthening conceptual clarity on various gender dynamics, gender norms, patriarchy, and its differentiated effects on girls' and boys' progression in education. The second objective is to offer space for insights and reflective conversations on the status of girls' education, specifically on 6 thematic areas. And these thematic areas include 1, which is related to gender-based violence, and the focus in this regard is on gender-based violence in learning institutions. Besides the gender-based violence, the second one, the second thematic area is related to sexual and reproductive health. And for this, the question we ask ourselves as a movement is, when we talk about provision of sanitary towels for girls, we need to look at why they matter and looking into budgetary allocation that yes, 10 years ago, it was a win. How far are we and what is happening? Then we have the third thematic area, which is the what about boys narrative, which is really in regard to why we have the webinar today. And by the end of it, we will have already have an idea what it's about. But basically, every time we talk about girls' education, the question is always there. So what about the boys? And whether we've not concentrated so much on the boys and forgotten about the girls. And then the next is about the girls' agency, where we are looking at, yes, girls are facing the same challenges for a long period of time. So we want to make sure that they also are able to have that agency to do something about themselves. Then we also have the thematic area on climate change and girls' education, where, yes, when you look at the effects of climate change in terms of the extreme, when there is drought or when there is flood, those who are most affected are the girls. It brings about low attendance, issues of increased dropouts, as well as even child marriage, among other issues. So that's also another thematic area that we are looking into as the GED. Then we are looking also regarding the policies on gender and education, Policies in terms of, yes, we already have existing policies and we've made great strides towards that. But are these policies effective? What are the gaps that are there towards that? So basically, that is what the gender and education thematic areas are about. And through that, then we are looking at what must we do now moving forward. Yes, we have the movement and we want to build a momentum and a sense of urgency towards addressing the issues of gender inequalities and have significant impact on the outcomes and especially future for all children. We are also looking into making sure that we build a common understanding that has shared commitment and shared accountability, as well as having practical solutions, including even more finances, that we have better roadmaps that will bring the implementation and the impact of what we are talking about being felt by that girl who is even in that remote area through the gender and education movement. And then lastly, be part of the gender and education movement. So the partners of the gender and education movement, as you can see them through support from Echidna Giving, is when we are able to have this webinar among other activities. And then the rest are the other partners. Thank you. Back to you, Christine.
Thank you so much, Felicitas, for that introduction to the Gender and Education Dialogues and for welcoming us generally. I want us to move to our presentation of the day that is going to be done by Professor Mushira. So, Prof, I think you can go ahead and already share your screen. Professor John Mushira is currently a visiting assistant professor and director of African Languages program in the Center for African Studies at the University of Florida. And previously, he has worked in various capacities at the African Population and Health Research Center. He was also part of the Presidential Working Party on Education Reforms in Kenya, a reviewer for the government of Kenya's National Education Sector Strategic Plan. He's also worked for the Association for Development of Education in Africa, British Council, FCDO, and a few other international organizations and national organizations. So, Prof, it's great to have you. Please take us through your presentation for the day. You can enlarge your screen kindly or put on slideshow format.
See the launch screen?
It's still not on slideshow.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
From my end, shows slideshow. Let me try to go forward. Okay. How about now?
Sorry, on our end, it's still showing your slides, your various slides, 1 up to 7.
Sir, if you can stop screen sharing and then start it again on the slideshow, then we'll be able to see it.
Okay, let me do it once more. Sorry. Good now?
Okay, still a challenge on our end. Maybe Paul can share from this
Maybe,
end.
yeah,
You
yes,
could start,
yes, yeah, because it's
you could start a bit with the introduction and we'll catch up
yes,
on
yes, yeah,
the
yeah,
slides
yes, yes,
kindly.
yeah. I'll let Paul go ahead and share, so I'll stop sharing from my end. But thank you so much, everyone, for this time. to speak, to discuss with you on this presentation and this dialogue about What About Boys. So the first thing when I saw this topic, actually, yes, it hit me light on because as a boy, and these are the questions that most of the people, when you work on girls issues, when I've done, girls related project, I was working with the Ministry of Education, designing or developing the gender education policy, the new one which is at some final stages. And these are the same questions. So, but now in thinking about the topic, you say, well, are we yet there with Kenyan girls still experiencing education inequality? So do we really need to speak about What About Boys when we still have some inequalities among the girls? And so we're going to go through this discussion presentation. And Paul, I just want to confirm that you're sharing on the screen. I can go ahead and make the presentation, right?
Yes, go ahead. We can see
Perfect.
the
Thank you.
slides.
Thank you so much. So just to start with, the presentation is just going to be very simple. We start with the highlights, then we go to the background, then the methodology, then I'll take you through the 4 key findings, and then discuss or present the policy recommendations. So to start with some highlights on this study, we find that there exist disparities in low and medium income countries. But this has really improved given the global, regional, and national initiatives. But despite this, girls continue lagging behind in terms of access to education at primary level, secondary, and post-secondary level. And their completion rate is still behind the boys. This is due to social cultural barriers that impede equity in learning achievements. So this paper aims to highlight the progress that has been made in bringing gender equity over the last 1 decade and identify some of the potential strategies, working with key multiple stakeholders to support and to ensure that the potential that is there for the girls and young women is achieved. Now, to the background, we find that Kenya ranks 76th among 144 nations on the Global Gender Gap Index with a score of 0.694. This is not high, as it's a little bit better, but when you look at the educational attainment, actually, Kenya is ranked 120th place based on the Kenya National Gender Statistic Assessment. But we find that there are several strategies as well as initiatives. We find that Aspiration 6 and Target 17 of the Agenda 2063 of the African Union specifically is centered on promoting gender equity, empowering women and girls, and especially combating violence and discrimination against them. We find also the gender equity strategy for the Continental Education Strategy for Africa, which is in the final stages of implementation, has been in the forefront of ensuring that a curriculum is created, pedagogy is put in place to ensure that girls continue being retained in school, because retention in school for girls is a major problem. We find that the evaluation of the framework in relation to the 52 UN minimum set of quantitative gender indicators. So these are the indicators that have been put forth by the UN, obviously to ensure achievement of the Sustainable Development Goal. We find that there exist inequalities or inadequacies that require immediate attention, even girls are going to achieve their what they are meant to achieve at various levels of education. The paper therefore stipulates some integral policy interventions for addressing barriers to equity in education, to combating various challenges, gender-based violence, sexual harassment, and of course, discriminative cultural practices. And this is very, very important given we find that girls are doing worse, but most importantly, girls are doing worse, especially from poor backgrounds, and they are also not doing well in terms of enrollment. So I'll go right to the methodology of the study. So the study used a document review approach and also synthesized data from the secondary, data from various stakeholders. Document review, without going so much on it, is very well known methodology of utilizing rich resources from literature reviews because of its indicative research design approach. And I also reviewed resources from recent journals, from the key report from the government, and civil society prayers. The secondary data that was used majorly came from the Kenya National Bureau of Statistics. I reviewed some data from National Gender and Equality Commission from their previous reports, the Usawa Agenda, especially the final report that was presented recently, the Teacher Service Commission, the Joint Animation Board, and the Ministry of Education data specifically. The key findings, go ahead and present the 4 key findings, because those are the main things that we need to interrogate to see what really needs to be done. To start with, the first key finding that I found was that there is multifaceted interventions that require that are required to address systematic barriers that continue hindering equity in education. So this is important because we find that issues of poverty, cultural norms, and perception are affecting girls, and also girls endure a lot of gender-based violence across, from homes, from the community, as well as sometimes in education institutions. Girls are tasked also to care for the young siblings. This creates inequalities in learning outcomes. Countries with higher boys' education attainments, we know that they see gender gap reduction. So this is important because when the boys are empowered, they become the heads of the households, and then these boys are able to support their children, who in this case, even when they become the fathers of the girls, but at the same time, they're also able to provide some directions to the community, given their position at the head of the household and the patriarchal societies that exist in African nations, and also especially even in Kenya. Educated and trained young women also, we find that they have higher self-efficacy and autonomy. So they also are able to access educational outcomes at a better rates. They have improved health outcomes. Also, they have a better well-being. Better well-being is important because it leads to reduced cases of gender-based violence. It ensures there's lower fertility rates, and of course, it helps to reduce unplanned pregnancies. So when you empower girls, then all of these vices that end up leading to poverty, that also become, get translated to those other challenges, get reduced. Then the second finding was that gender disparities persist in poor households and marginalized communities. Why is this important? We find that based on evidence from 63 countries, the poorest households and approximately 22% out of school rate, while those who are from the richest quintile are only 6% out of school population. So this is a big disparity, meaning that if you coming from poor households, and you know that if you are most likely, if you don't access education, then you are more likely not to get employment or livelihood. You are more likely to end up in a poor household. So countries with also higher boys' education attainments see gender gap reduction over time. So investing in boys rather than girls, it's not going to be advantageous. It's going to continually marginalize girls in terms of accessing resources, and then ends up to bringing up more poor households. The Gender Parity Index in pre-primary education show that 22 counties are doing well, but there's disparity in preschool enrollment rates, with 52% of the boys compared with only 43% of the girls enrolled. This is lower compared with the national average, where boys are at 50%, while the girls are 49.8% in preschool. And we find that the marginalized communities, especially those from ASAL, arid and semi-arid lands like Isiolo and Turkana, they have 6.5% and 6.3% less girls than boys transitioning from primary to secondary school level. So this 6% might seem small, but it's really significant when you look at how that translates to various other levels. There are 4% fewer girls in boys than boys in West Pokot and Mandera. This is based on the Ministry of Education statistical booklet 2020. Now I go to the finding given of like 7 minutes left. So the current trends review worse gender disparity in favor of boys at secondary level. So when you look at this graph, you see that this is a graph that could not fit in the slide because there are 20 counties. So I tried to compress the 47 counties. I tried to compress to a few, and just to give you a subset on what is happening. We find that when you look at we want it to be one, right? We want it to be at one, as closer to one, where to have a gender parity index. But you find that there's more happening down than more happening up. So if you look at the green one, which is for the primary school, sorry, the blue one for the primary school education level, we find that it's a little bit better. But when you look at the orange bar, the bar with orange color, you find that there's very high fluctuation in terms of how counties are doing across the country. But also you find that there's more at below one. So which shows there's disparity in favor of boys, especially at the secondary level. Why is this happening? So we find that this is actually more so fast in ASAL regions, but also the boys enrollment at secondary school level is better than in some counties, like Vihiga, Elgeyo Marakwet, Meru, and Kirinyaga. When you look at these counties are a little bit more privileged in terms of like their agricultural rich regions, but you find that the ASAL continues lagging behind, and the enrollment is worse at the secondary level. Now, going to the fourth finding, which is the last finding, the female enrollment and completion at secondary school remains lower despite gains at primary school level, and transition rates are worst at post-secondary level. So this is just in continuation of what was presented in the previous finding, but this one is specifically looking at, yes, we have made gains at the primary school level, but the completion rates, because of the high dropout rate, is higher at post-secondary level. So, and this is actually consistent with the data from Sub-Saharan Africa, about that 8% of the girls don't complete upper secondary school level. Just imagine almost 40% of the girls going to school in primary school level, but they are not able to get out of the secondary school, so they are not able to reap the benefits of investment in education. So gender-related barriers continue existing, leading to poor grade translation. There's high dropout rates, and there's also low learning outcomes. And being out of school for the girls is even more challenging, or even more disadvantageous, because of the issues of the socio-cultural factors that continues to make them to be more vulnerable to early marriage and pregnancy. When the girl is out of school, that girl is more likely to get married early, is likely to be pregnant, is likely to end up having more further vulnerabilities. This is despite the Government of Education, the Minister of Education in Kenya efforts on 100% translation policy, 100% translation policy. There are several, intervention like the school entry, intervention. We still continue seeing girls being disadvantaged. So the gender disparity in access to secondary school is there, and we see from the data from the Kenya National Examination Council baseline report, and we see that the peak happens at Form 2. And when I tried to interrogate this data, I found that it happens at Form 2 because it's at the onset of the puberty. And so these girls need to continue being, supported. The next report shows early pregnancy is the second most contributor to absenteeism, accounting to almost 80%, 75% of the girls don't go to school. Compared with 80% who don't go to school because of school fees. So meaning that is a big problem. And this is also consistent with what the principal said in terms of why they drop out. This next graph shows that there are issues in terms of even transition to those other levels of education, the post-secondary level, whereby for almost a decade, girls continue being disadvantaged in accessing TVET education. If you look at this from 2015 to 2023, we still fall off from 1. It was worse at 2015 with 0.66 parity index. We've really improved the last 2-3 years with 0.86 and above, but we still want to achieve a 1. And finally, on this enrollment, we find that girls don't have access to the STEM field as much compared with boys, and we know that STEM field has more employability. So if more girls access STEM field, then they are going to, to be able to access employment. But also they continue lagging behind in terms of accessing university in general compared with the boys. And if I take you to the final finding, is boys falling behind in some regions could have implication on girl empowerment and achievement of gender equity. So this is very important, and we find that there's strong correlation between poverty and gender-based violence. So we need to empower boys so that the girls are able to be bred up in a richer or more endowed families, but also to combat those other vices like gender-based violence and intimate partner violence. And of course, I mentioned about the issues of employment and forth. So finally, these are the 4 key recommendations that came up from this study. First, we need to promote a multi-sectoral approach for bridging gender inequalities across different levels of education. The Kenya Institute of Public Policy Research and Analysis needs to think of opportunities in which they can partner with the National Gender and Equality Commission. I'm glad their CEO is here, and other gender-focused government institutions and civil society players to develop gender policy enabling environment, targeting especially targeting the marginalized populations, because we found that these are the ones who are really affected. And marginalized does not necessarily only mean ASAL. This also means girls who are in the low income, low income families, as also those who are in the slums or urban informal settlement. Then collaboration among government institutions and universities need to be strengthened to develop capacity for the county government potential to assess and develop context-relevant equity-led interventions. So we know that there's the devolved government that is in place, and we find that different counties continue having different challenges in terms of the access, retention, and so we need to be more specific in terms of addressing this from a county level. But we understand that the county government do not have capacity, so there's need to work with the various government institutions and the universities where we have maybe researchers, so that we are able to build capacity for the county government, with focusing on different departments. And finally, the Minister of Education needs to continue to collaborate with the Kenya Institute of Curriculum Development and the Kenya National Examination Council, specifically to develop and operationalize a framework for implementing accelerated learning programs. So it's already in place, but I think there's need to really operationalize it so that we are able to support the out-of-school children and youth by integrating various aspects of formal education system that will enable access, retention, and transition, so that both girls and boys are able to achieve the milestone that are required, so that we don't end up experiencing challenges, especially for the girls who end up being more vulnerable with these challenges if we are not able to achieve gender equity. Thank you so much. That's bring me to the end of this presentation. Questions and feedback are welcome.
Yeah, thank you so much for that presentation. I welcome everyone to put their questions or their comments on the chat. I know we've gone pretty fast because we are already running behind on time, but thank you so much for taking time to walk us through this presentation. Just for everybody's knowledge, this study is open to take feedback from you so that we can sharpen it a little bit more. So please feel free to send your comments, your questions. As I said earlier when we began, your feedback is very, very welcome. So great points there, talking about the social cultural barriers that are impeding, the girls' education, and also the vulnerability also to boys over certain issues. I know we didn't have enough time to just unpack quite a lot that is in the paper, but maybe I can allow the panelists to come in and share their thoughts on this issue, and we can unpack a little bit more from where Prof left off. I would like to welcome today our panelists. We have three panelists with us today. We have Dr. Purity Ngina, the CEO of the National Gender and Equality Commission, GEC. We have Mr. Silas Obuhatsa, the chairperson of the National Parents Association, and Dr. Sheila Wamahio, the director of Jaslika. A very warm welcome to our panelists. And without further ado, I welcome Dr. Ngina to share your thoughts with us. What do you think? What about the boys in this conversation on gender and equity? Please take it away.
Yeah, thanks so much. I will really focus on what we have done at the National Gender and Equality Commission. We went to 7 counties trying to establish what are these emerging perception on exclusion of boy child in the gender equality agenda. I think the question we all need to answer is whether empowering girls has led to disempowering boys, and what are there legal framework that can show that. And probably by the end of this conversation, we could all reflect on that. Of course, the National Gender and Equality Commission is a constitutional commission. I just wanted to mention that. And we are working for 6 special interest groups: children, youth, women, persons with disability, minority and marginalized, and older members of the society. And we have an act of parliament that operationalized the National Gender and Equality Commission. Of course, for this conversation, I will limit myself to the legal instrument, Article 43 of the Constitution, Article 53, 100% transition, which I know Professor Muchera has mentioned, and of course, the Basic Education Act. But we went to the field to collect data, Kiambu, Kakamega, Kisumu, Embu, Garissa, Kericho, to understand this emerging question. Every time you sit with people, they're asking yourself, and asking you this question of what about boys. We administered questionnaires to really the government, people involved in the space of meeting youth and children and boys to understand what are their perception. We did focus group discussions to enrich. But of course, there is need for more comprehensive data. Even from the presentation of Muchera, we could see there is gaps in the data. What did we establish is that from this conversation, it is perceived, and you can see the choice of word is a perception for girls lagging, that boy child is lagging behind. Of course, majority of respondents saying there are no interventions, because when you look at the interventions, especially from the government side, 100, you'll talk about sanitary towels. Again, this is a biological issue, so you'll still find girls getting that. They have no choice. So if people are going to the service of the interventions they think, then you'll find really some of this coming out. And the drivers, of course, were home and family, socialization process, culture and traditional factors, and of course, peer pressure. Of course, there are certain recommendations to base ourselves on laws and policies to ensure data is disaggregated, which I think is very critical, because we speak and we are not sure about who. So if we all people are collecting data can disaggregate our data, tell the story of both boys and girls, then this question of what about boys will be speaking with evidence. Poverty reductions, because what we establish is that boys are going to the border sector. to earn money. And I know that is an argument. When girl probably became pregnant, especially during COVID, the boy went to get a source of income, but still they dropped out of school. So there are a bit of issues that we need to really look into that. And of course, there are some recommendations for the county government. But I wanted to speak about the hidden story. From that data, from every time you listen to the conversation, unless you're able to go to the hidden story, you cannot really understand the magnitude of the issue. So when you look at these exam results, of course, we need to monitor this 2024 result, because we saw a shift. If you look at 2022, boys had performed better, which was not the case in 2023. So there's a bit of people really now trying, we need to focus on that, to ask ourselves questions. But even when girls performed better, they did well in subjects like English, Kiswahili, CRE, home science, and art and design. And I'm happy the professor talked about STEM, because the country has pronounced itself that they would want 60% of their children to get to the STEM field because of job projection. But our girls are not performing well in some of these subjects. Hence, even when the performance would look like the girls have already now overtaken boys, but where will they go? Which jobs opportunity exists for them? And there is need for us to always complete the story, so that you're not, the data doesn't give you the false perception. The other story is when you look at this data that was released by USAWA, that there are no laboratories for girls, and hence, even when we do all the mentorship to put girls in STEM, they don't have a lab. You know, it's one thing for me to say I want to become a doctor, but if you don't provide a laboratory for me, really, then they would know, even with any mentorship or any exposure to mentors who have done STEM, I won't join STEM. So these are the hidden story that we need actually to speak about, even when we are confronted with that question about what about boys, so that you're able to show really the real story using evidence. The girls still are going through FGM, 15%, which is a big number. 15% are getting pregnant. 65% of women are not feeling safe. Actually, the report that was released, I think on Sunday, or it was in the newspaper by UN, it is said actually 70% of women are not feeling safe, which was very scary. I think I read it in Sunday's newspaper, and I think it continues to point to these issues of hidden story that we need to really unpack the data for us to look into that. So I wanted to react to that, and had 5 minutes. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ngina. Thank you for that brief and very concise and very powerful response to that. We need to look at the hidden story. We need to look at the data also to be able to tease out this conversation on gender equity. And when we discuss about perception, perception can only be, discussed a little bit broader when we start looking at the data they are in. Let me welcome Silas to maybe pick up from there. What is the parents' perception on the perception that boys are lagging behind? What is the parents' point of view?
Thank you, Tim. I'm very sorry you can't see me because my video has problems. I don't have much to say because already the speakers that have been on the floor have talked much. I'll be a bit faster. One is that, as the former speaker has said, there's a hidden story. I feel that much has to be done to discover exactly what is being talked about, because people may say, or we may imagine that the girls are doing well as far as education is concerned than the boys in terms of gender, but the real story behind is not well known. Because look, when you look at the issue of poverty, poverty is across, does not come for females and for males and leave the females out. So poverty is cutting across. If there's a question of uniform, if there's a question of food, if there's a question of funding, it's affecting all the children, both boys and girls. So we can't just assume that the girls are doing well than the boys, and yet they're all facing these problems. There could be other issues hidden. For example, there could be drug abuse and substances that are affecting the boys. You find that many boys may want to get in this than the girl child. So because of that, we don't have to say that the girl child is favored in terms of going to school and acquiring education. It's because the boy child in some areas may find himself in things that such as drug abuse and substances that don't allow him to access school and proceed. We look at things like HIV and AIDS. We have the children that are orphaned. It depends on where the children are coming from. It could be another issue that maybe a number of children are orphaned, and most of these could be maybe boys. We never know that, so it's another fact we need to look at. Then quickly, there is a question of parenting. You know, many families lack what you call positive parenting. And when there's no positive parenting, you find that in some families, mostly, the boy child wants to rule himself than the girl child, because the boy child wants to control himself. So he takes power from the parents, and especially in the single families, where you find that maybe the boy child is living with a father who does not have a mother to assist. So the father may not be having all that knowledge and skills to look at the issues that are affecting the boy child, and therefore the boy child may just end up dropping out of school because nobody cares. There's no proper positive parenting for these children. Quickly, the emphasis on the girl child over the boy child. Stereotyped, people will always say that the girl child is favored than the boys. So because of that, some children may feel that at the end of the day, Kenyans want girls to go to school than ourselves, and they may just find their ways out of the school, which can also be another factor. Then family backgrounds. This is another issue that we need to look at, because if you go to families where nobody has gone to school, or where the females have gone to school and the males have not, for example, if a mother is a teacher and the father of the children is a boda, you will find that the girls will want to take after the mother. They want to be teachers. They want to be professionals. But the boy child will feel that he takes after the father. He also wants to be a boda. So going to school for the boy child may not make sense. That's family background. Families where there's no education, again, you'll find that nobody can advise the children. Some families have more girls than boys. So you find in a family that has maybe 4 girls and 1 boy, the boy may not go to school because the mother will always sit with the girls and advise the girls, but the father will always leave the boy child just on his own. So the boy feels discouraged and feels disloyal in the family, and this kind of factors are all contributing. Quickly, let me look at the economic factors. A business or trade, you find that in most families, many feel that they should go for trade outside, and you find that fathers may encourage the boy children, stop what you are doing, going to school, go for boda, go and do fishing, go and ride the boats, like at the coast. You find that these things may be happening. Money hunger. The boy child may want quickly to go and look for money than the girl child. So the girl child may want to stay in school and learn when the boy child wants to go and look for money. Lack of employment opportunities. You find that some families may discourage the boy children. You go to school, look at the universities. We have so many universities in the country who have no employment. Look at the teachers, they have no employment. The junior secondary school teachers. So why do you go to school? Do something else. Get out and do something else. But the girl child will stick in school. When the boy child feels that going to school is a waste of time, the parents have talked, or the uncles, or the nieces, the nephews have talked. Street children, you see, go to the streets and you find that in the streets there are more boys than girls doing hawking, selling of groundnuts on the roads. You have seen this around. They are selling water and all that. Then long life education. You find that the boy child may not want to stay in school longer to complete school, like now the 844 system. Then now the junior secondary school system that has come again. One may feel that when I go to grade 8 or grade 9, I'm already like a secondary school child or a senior secondary school student. I can drop out of school and just do my business. I'm now able to do that because I'm already a high school student. And therefore, all these are factors that are adding to what we are seeing. Therefore, we need more research, dig deeper into the stories that are hidden to find out why these issues of gender disparities are coming about. That's what I can say.
Thank you so much, Silas, for that. More hidden stories. And there are hidden stories for the girls and there are hidden stories for the boys. And who will tell these stories? Thank you so much for sharing this information about cross-cutting factors that are affecting both boys and girls and other things that are also affecting boys directly. I want to invite Dr. Sheila Wamahio to react to that, maybe picking up from where Silas has left us. What is the hidden story here? What are your thoughts on this conversation?
Thank you so much, Mona, and to everybody present today. I'd like to ask, I'm looking at the time, and I think people would like to ask questions, so I need some guidance about the time. It's almost 10 minutes to 3.
Yeah, no problem. I think you can take your 5 to 6 minutes. We are going to respond to comments on the chat to save on time. So please go ahead. Yeah.
So thank you so much. You started by asking what are the hidden stories? And maybe I'll start off from there. We are discussing this issue of what about the boys? And one of the hidden stories perhaps is that this is not a new topic at all. When we started with the issue of the girl child in the early 90s, those of us who are gender researchers and in the space of gender justice, we were asked that question and there was a pushback. And many of the narratives that you hear today were still the same narrative that was asked. And mind you, those days, the gender gaps were even wider than it is today, right? But that pushback was already there. So, so that is the first maybe hidden story because many people don't know that. Now, going back to our focus of this day, what about boys? I think it depends on how you ask that question. You know, your intonation with which you ask this question. So you can say, you know, so you've presented all this, you're talking about girls, so what about the boys? Or you can ask, so what about the boys? You know, it depends on what response you get. I think in this conversation today, to some extent, both responses to the questions asked differently have been answered to some extent, but not fully answered. Dr. Mushira took us through some statistics and showed us how girls continue to be disadvantaged today, especially at the secondary level and tertiary level, but even in primary, there's still very many pockets of disadvantage. And the gender gaps have, to some respect, has narrowed down, but not sufficiently. But what I would like to say here, without repeating what he said or what others have said, is numbers are important, but numbers are not sufficient to explain to us and also to take us on the path of gender equality. And I'm focusing on gender equality, not only equity, but equality. Let me give you a story, not from this country, but from Lesotho. Lesotho is a tiny little country in Southern Africa. Many of you may know of that. In Lesotho, for very many years now, girls have been outpacing boys at primary. Secondary, there's a drop, but girls, there's still more girls in the education system than boys, and also at the university level. So you'd think, oh, here there's a reversed discrimination against boys. Boys are being marginalized. But when you also look at other kinds of data, and that's why an intersectional perspective is extremely important. When you look at the other side of the picture, Lesotho is also one country where you have amongst the highest rate of gender-based violence. It's also a country where you find, despite women being educated, they are still, in terms of what you call employment, they don't have the best positions. They're still going for lower positions. Men are still at the top. So we have to be very, very careful to take a deeper look and insights into this issue about what about boys? Because if you're not careful, if we say, no, we don't want equality, we only want equity, sadly, we will end up in a situation where issues like gender-based violence and associated increase in teen pregnancies and rape and all these issues, and the whole issue of self-image will persist. So that's a point I wanted to make. And now related to that, I'll repeat, we need to look at, we must be very careful not to conflate definitions and how we conceptualize this whole issue of gender equality. Equality and equity and empowerment, they don't mean the same thing. Parity is the minimum, the lowest minimum, where you're talking about the same number of boys and girls. And I've already given you the example of Lesotho, where there are more girls. But equality has not happened. So equality, we must understand. I've seen, is it a meme or whatever that is going around, that goes around, and many civil society organizations have bought to it, which to me is a misrepresentation of the difference between equality and equity. Equality is ideal. Equality is an ideal. It is a goal. You know, we talk about SDG 5. It is about gender equality. When we look at our constitution, there's the whole Bill of Rights is about equality. Yes, equity is mentioned, but it is equality. Equality is our goal. Equity is about social justice and how we use that social justice to achieve that goal, to level the playing field. And in leveling the playing field, let me give an example, the example of lack of menstrual. You know, we know that absenteeism is caused not by pregnancy per se, because yes, lots of girls get pregnant, but that does not mean that all the girls are getting pregnant, but all girls get menstruation. And many girls from poorer households miss out on school because of menstruation. And I think it is Dr. Purity who mentioned it earlier, that, you know, it's a biological thing. So you cannot complain, and sometimes people see it as a competition. Oh, girls are getting sanitary pads and they're getting panties. Boys are not getting anything. Is it about competition? No, it is not. Because it's a biological imperative girls must have. And without the pads, without panties, they can't even go to school. Boys can go to school even if they don't have the underwear under the shorts. They can still go to school. So then the false equivalence when we try to push boys, that boys should also get something. I agree, boys should get something, but not based on fallacious arguments. And I think our responsibility is to do away with the myths that and misinformation as part of the gender and education dialogue. I think boys need attention. I think boys, we must pay attention to boys as well as girls. But we must not do it based on false equivalences. We must do it from a point of knowledge and respect. For it, when we say that girls are getting too much attention, we must say boys have the unique needs. I think Dr. Purity has mentioned that, and Silas has alluded to it as well. We must look at what are the unique needs, but more importantly than the unique needs is the mindset change. We need mindset change from all of us. And because, let's say a girl has gotten periods in school, right? And, you know, she has soiled her uniform and people are laughing at her. That's a mindset. Why is menstruation being stigmatized? It's a natural thing. So if we had a mindset change and also included the boys, that this is a natural thing, don't laugh. Girls, don't laugh. Don't ridicule the girl. That's the kind of thing I'm talking about. We must do it through our curriculum. We talk about gender responsive pedagogy, but we are not doing that. Because if we look at it holistically, we should be able to change the mindsets. And maybe finally, we cannot have a conversation like this without referring to the patriarchy. Because it is the patriarchy that is at the root of these negative mindsets, which, if I may quote, and this is a quotation from 1994, by Dr. Mampela Rampele, who was the Vice Chancellor of the Cape Town University. She is also somebody who is very well known in the Black consciousness movement, the freedom struggle of South Africa. She was a co-founder of the Black consciousness movement alongside Steve Biko. So she was saying, both men and women are disadvantaged by the current gender roles. Yet all of us have the masculine and feminine sides of our psyche. We must talk about developing a caring community, about developing our whole being, which basically means, and I will end with that, which basically means that issue of respect for one another. We both have our gender, the patriarchy, and she had said it in another place, which I'm not quoting, but patriarchy has closed our minds. So even when we're saying, oh, boys will do worse when they're poor, but girls, you know, the heads of the households, are we already accepting that men should always be the head of household? That is the patriarchy telling us that. We know in reality there are very many women who are heads of households and the children grow up to be just fine. So I think I will just end with that this need to change this patriarchal mindset, go to the bottom of, look at the systemic barriers. Systemic barriers go deep. And we also need, I know Dr. Muchira gave some policy recommendations, but I will end by a recommendation that all of us, each one of us, we are all mainly from civil society organizations, and we have GEC with Dr. Purity representing GEC. What is it that we can do in our own capacity through our organizations, instead of just talking about we must do this policy or that, the important, what can we do in our own, wherever we are, to change this mindset that is disadvantaging the girls, but also disadvantaging boys, because they're also not able to develop to the full potential in an equal and humanistic way. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sheila. That was really profound. And I can see we are 1 minute above our time, so we won't have a lot of time to take questions. But I can see from the comments and recommendations generally, there is an agreement that this is a conversation about boys and girls. And I think largely an agreement with you, Dr. We should, we should pay attention to the boys and as well pay attention to the girls, but we should be careful then from which perspective, how are we asking this question? We should not do it from a perspective of misinformation, but rely on data and rely on studies and rely on lived experiences to bring out these issues objectively and look at what are boys' unique needs and what are girls' unique needs and what should we do about this to address these issues. So allow us to wrap up because of time. We don't want to keep you very long. The comments are still in the chat section. Please feel free to look at some of these recommendations. I can see recommendations from Silas here. I can see some comments from Patrick and Celine. Thank you so much for sharing all these resources in the chat from, I don't know how to pronounce your name, Ban. I don't know how to do the first one. Thank you so much for sharing all these recommendations and comments. So I allow people to read through this, and I welcome Winnie to give us closing remarks.
Yeah, thank you so much, everyone. And, you know, having gone over time, I think it would be prudent not to use a lot more of our time, but I hope this session has been engaging for all of us. We realize that there's still a lot to be done. And I like, you know, the agreement on the fact that we need to find this, the hidden story. And Sheila has taken us, Dr. Omahu has taken us back to, this was a discussion even in the 90s, all the way to the present. And the fact that each of us, wherever we are, we try and make sure that at least we do or we have our own contributions, whether it is through research, whether it is through conversations, whether it is through policy making, whatever space that we have, I believe that we are going to use this. So just a reminder that we are still very much interested in receiving your feedback and questions regarding what Dr. Muchira presented on the desk review that was done, calling on further information that we may have to firm up this discussion. Lots of information we have seen is still needed to be included here. And we welcome your feedback. He has shared his email address with us here. But also there's a form that has been shared by Felicitas Muikali on the chat. It also gives us an opportunity to even add our voice or regarding what more do we want to see in the paper and in future dialogues or future engagements when we speak about the various issues on gender. So without taking a lot more time, thank you very much to all the participants. Thank you for our presenter, the moderator, and the panelists for this session. And please do not forget to share with us your feedback. Have a great afternoon, a great day, wherever you are. Thank you so much.